Earlier, I spoke with Ben Chuckle, one of the authors of the open letter and the editor of the Morning Star, the biggest and longest-running left-wing newspaper in the UK. I also talked to John Ross, Senior Fellow of the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University of China, a promoter of the open letter. Some quite big names, as I mentioned, John Pilger, Oliver Stone, Tariq Ali and Ken Loach, just to name a few. Ben, as one of the signatories, how do you look at the weight behind this open letter? What possibly brought them together?
I believe it's the concern which is around freedom of speech. People who've signed this letter have completely different political opinions. They have completely different views of the Chinese government and the Chinese revolution. So I don't think we could say because they've signed the letter, that's no expression of any opinion on CGTN itself. What it is a vote of confidence in free speech, saying that people should be able to watch different broadcasters, they should be able to hear different opinions, and they shouldn't have those decisions made for them by the British government.
John, now the British media regulator Ofcom revoked the license for CGTN to broadcast in the UK on February the 4th. You immediately wrote an article saying that the UK should immediately reverse the decision. What do you think of the open letter this time? Why is it necessary to put such weight against the move?
Well, I think the issue is that what is being done is extremely dangerous, the ban on CGTN, not merely for China. It doesn't really affect China, but it affects Britain. One of the most dangerous things that can happen in the world is when people don't understand the situation in other countries and take very ill-informed decisions. I'm an economist, I know that. Extraordinary misunderstandings regarding China exist in the American media and in the British media, and it's therefore vital people hear the views of people from China. It's no secret that CGTN is a state broadcaster. It's the same as the BBC. People will then doubtless take that into account when thinking about what they think about the programs. But to cut off a source of information about what is the views of China, which is one of the main actors in the world situation, is very dangerous.
The open letter says, among other things, numerous private and state channels have clear political agendas or control. The BBC itself, for example, which had its staff vetted by MI5, has not had its broadcasting license revoked. Ben, could you elaborate on this? What exactly does it mean here, and why is it important to mention this?
I think it's important because there is an attempt by the British government to pretend that the BBC is an independent broadcaster, which is not politically biased. It's politically supposed to be a neutral broadcaster. So they're saying that it's different from CGTN, which they accused of being controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. But as there was a long-running scandal about the role of MI5, the British intelligence agency, in vetting BBC staff. That began, way back, as soon as the BBC was first established. So what this part of the letter is pointing out is that the BBC is a very political institution, and it's not just the BBC. All of the mainstream British media, apart from the BBC, are privately owned. They're owned by very wealthy tycoons. They follow extremely political lines. We saw that in Britain in recent years. So political media is nothing new in Britain. All of the media is political. The point that the letter is making is that it's complete hypocrisy to single out CGTN and say that because this is controlled by the Chinese state, it's not acceptable. That's true of so many other publications which have not been banned.
Given the current atmosphere of anti-China rhetoric and sentiments being fanned by right-wing forces, do you or any other signatories fear any consequence such as loss of jobs or life opportunities or deplatforming for defending China?
Yes, I mean, I don't fear losing my job because the Morning Star is an independent newspaper. It's owned by its readers. It's a co-op. I believe that the Morning Star's readers support the position we're taking on China, but there is a real danger of no platforming, as you say. We see people who put forward unpopular views in these areas are often denied platforms throughout the well, throughout the Labour movement, but also in terms of being invited onto British news channels like the BBC. We've already seen that. A few years ago, I was, sometimes the Morning Star was asked to go and give its opinion on channels like the BBC. That doesn't happen anymore. So I do think there's a real push to shut down these kind of opinions. And I think the more that things like the ban on CGTN are allowed to go unchallenged, the more dangerous it is for the other publications, including the Morning Star, because the idea of a ban becomes normalized, and it could happen to other publications as well.
John, I want to ask you about the kind of attention that's being given to this issue, the kind of support that you have that this initiative of no Cold War with China enjoys currently in the UK, in the British society. And what does that say about the kind of state of the media environment and the political correctness that is preventing people from getting the correct information?
Well, the issue which is taking place at the present time is certainly the mass media, as Ben says, is increasingly shutting out alternative voices who want to present a view which is not that of their owners or not that of the BBC. What No Cold War campaign did was, however, it got rather well-known people on social media. Collectively, of course, they're not as powerful as, say, of the big mainline media, but put together and with independent publications like the Morning Star, they reach a significant number of people. I mean, hundreds of thousands, or if you take the signatories of No Cold War's international statement on social media, they have several million followers. So this therefore means that it is possible to get out such an alternative view. But just to return to what Ben said, I've got no doubt that if a junior journalist on a newspaper who was against the ban on CGTN signed this letter, their career would be very seriously damaged or might be completely terminated. So we're engaged in a fight to get out these views. Say, fortunately, the people who signed this letter can't be treated in that way because they're too eminent, and that was why they were chosen to launch such a thing. But we see this as part of an ongoing campaign against such a Cold War. One hopes that the Biden administration will be more rational, but so far it isn't been, and the situation in Britain is that it follows what the US does. So therefore we see this as part of an ongoing campaign.
Ben, you lived in China as well for a few years, if I understand correctly. How do you compare China, based on your own experience, with how the country is portrayed by what you see on UK television or new media? And what do you think will be the consequence if a British media landscape is without the voice coming from China, the official voice, of course, coming from China?
Well, I think there's enormous ignorance about what life is like in China. There's huge ignorance about Chinese politics, about Chinese public opinion, about how Chinese people live. So, you know, that's dangerous because people make mistakes, as John has said, if they don't understand what's happening in other countries. So people don't know about the speed of Chinese development. They don't know about the huge difference lifting people out of poverty has made in China. And they don't know how developed China is either. I mean, I think one interesting example of that in recent times is the coronavirus crisis. There was an assumption, you know, this time last year and in the winter of 2019, that what could happen in China couldn't happen here. China was a poor country, a third world country, and that led to a very arrogant position on the behalf of the British government and I think the US government, where they ignored warnings from China about the virus. They didn't prepare, and then when it did hit our countries, tens of thousands of people died as a consequence of that laziness. And that was because people thought of China in a completely different way. They didn't understand the reality that in some ways China's actually more advanced than the West. I mean, its railway system is certainly much in advance of the British railway system. So that's one aspect. I think that there's a view that's sometimes put out that Chinese people are unfree, that they're brainwashed. That's completely not my impression, having lived there for several years. Chinese people are very well informed, very engaged politically. You know, they certainly, my Chinese friends had many strong opinions they never hesitated to share with me. So I think that there is a huge ignorance about it all, and that's big, real consequences to that.
Yeah. Finally, John, does it suffice, on the other hand, or some people might argue, to have reports of China on China by correspondents of UK media? I mean, you have China correspondents of several British media here in China, and they seem to be doing an active job talking about China.
That's funny. In fact, there's been several excellent exposés of the way that they distort stories of finding so-called prisons which actually turned out to be factories, and security guards with the normal security guards that you would have at factories and things like that. They're presenting an extremely biased view. It's, again, it's the situation with the BBC, which is the biggest of these. The agreement was that every single employee of the BBC, as it said, except for the cleaners, would be vetted by military intelligence. Do you believe, if that's the way that your staff is selected, that you're going to get an unbiased view? You're going to get a view which represents the views of the British state. Okay, that's fine. I treat the BBC as a state broadcasting organisation, but in that case, one also wants to hear what the view is from China. So, you know, CGTN's not pretending that it's not an official broadcasting organisation of China. People are quite sensible enough to listen to what its views. They'll take that into account. But it's vital that you hear the presentation of views as the situation is seen by China. You will then take into account the information that China gives. You'll take into account the information which is given by CNN or the BBC or the New York Times or whatever it is that you're reading, and do that. But if you cut one of these out, particularly if it's China's view, you are going to take dangerously wrong information. And then, as I said, you have very, very dangerous decisions taken on the basis of this. So I think that this has to be opposed on CGTN, not merely on grounds of free speech, etc., but also because it's actively dangerous in the context of the new Cold War.
Yeah, it can be self-harming, let's say, to the interests of the British society, to the British economy, as what we have seen the effects of the trade war on the American economy and American people. Many thanks to John Ross, Senior Fellow at the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies of Renmin University of China, and also to Ben Chuckle, editor of the Morning Star, the UK's biggest left-wing newspaper. With that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Li Xin in Beijing. Thanks for watching. You've got the point.